Hey guys. So, I wanted to talk today about the spiritual nature of disclosure. And I wanted to talk about this on both a personal and a collective level. Because I see participating in the disclosure movement as an opportunity for great service. But there's a very particular way into it that I think we can find that will help us to purify disclosure as a form of service to others in law of one terms. So there's a lot of hard work to be done, right? In getting this out. There's just a lot of work to be done. There's, media to be made, and there's uh, whistles to be blown. There's a lot of information to sort through and to organize and to deliver. So there is just a great deal of legitimate labor and work to be put in. And at the same time, there's an opportunity to become less and less attached to specific outcomes and to focus more intensely on the purity of intention and vibration within the work that we're doing. So rather than pouring ourselves into the work of generating articles, sharing intel, um, trying to get this information out there, and trying to more deeply understand it ourselves, I think the work itself can find a purity within the state of our being. And then it's not about, as a small example, trying to get this one person in your life to just believe or understand, or trying to force people within positions of authority to release specific information at a certain time. When we get attached to those things, then our attachment actually drains us of the purity of service we could be offering, right? If we really want to be service to others, then the attachment to outcome is somewhat self-serving. When there's a bigger picture and there's a lot of things going on that we don't have control over, then that level of detachment allows us to be more in alignment with service to others, because then our desire for small versions of the events uh, isn't going to get in the way of some of the larger things that need to happen that we may not be aware of, right? As a good example, Corey Good in one of his talks recently spoke about intervening on some non-terrestrials who were capturing and killing what they knew to be citizens of Earth, only to find out that they were retrieving beings from their soul group who had crashed here and gotten caught up in the incarnational cycle of Earth. So this is a great example of something where we don't have the bigger picture. And so our attachment to interfering and creating certain outcomes might actually be lessening our capacity to be of service. So when we're detached and yet putting in lots of work, we can find a balance there. As another really good example into this perspective, the law of one material states that the particular circumstances of harvest are, quote, very, very trivial. This has come up in a number of episodes of, I think, Cosmic Disclosure, and definitely in one of the New Wisdom Teachings episodes on Gaia. So, when we see the term very, very trivial, I think that's something for us to take to heart, because it's very tempting in this community to get caught up in the circumstances of harvest, of ascension, so to speak. And if it's true that the circumstances themselves are very trivial, then again, that's a calling to be less attached to how things play out and more focused on just the purity of your service and the purity of your state of being. So if you're working hard while maintaining a high vibrational state, then you don't need to worry so much about how things are going to play out and who's going to believe what and when people are going to wake up. Those become irrelevant, right? Which is actually very freeing. So I think there's a lot of wisdom that we can take away from the statement that the circumstances of ascension are very, very trivial. And that can help us deepen our work into manifesting full disclosure as a very beautiful form of service. Then we can really just focus on how we're vibrating and how hard we're working. And everything else can sort of fall away. It becomes much more calm and much more simple. Um, And it really can reduce a lot of anxiety when we're getting attached to outcomes and when we're getting insiders releasing information about certain things happening. And the attachment to that is a source of great anxiety. So, the way I see it is it's a combination of living more fully from our hearts while selflessly pouring ourselves into this work. Um, it's a form of healing work, right? So if we imagine that the compartmentalization of information on our planet is akin to wounds within the collective, right? These are deep cuts, moments of separation in a being that is seeking to be whole. So we've been subjected to these wounds through the compartmentalization of essential information. And so by decompartmentalizing the information that makes up the truth of our human circumstances, then we are healing the human collective with the balm of truth. But that's really through our experiencing of this information, right? Sharing it is a great service, but sharing it does not mean attachment to who's believing it, to what extent, when. It's actually none of our business. But sharing it is a beautiful thing. So separate sharing information and doing the work of creating disclosure type content, separate that from an attachment to outcomes and to shifting other people's perspectives. And it's a lot more peaceful. And the work can actually have a greater impact, even though it feels like the extra effort of forcing other people to believe and wake up is doing more. It's actually taking away from you, your being, your surface. So when we have no personal control over when and to what extent other individuals come to terms with this information, then we have this beautiful opportunity in which the hard work of bringing challenging information to light while staying unattached to whether or not people believe or absorb it when and in the way that we want, it becomes this really balanced opportunity for compassion and hard work to sort of combine with each other. So that your compassion for other people's process and the gradual nature that this has to happen, and for how traumatic and shocking it is for other people to wake up to certain truths, your compassion for that can be balanced by your hard work of creating content, pushing things into the public sphere, meditating on certain events. Those are all beautiful forms of service. And I think there's a deeper level of passion that we can achieve when there's less effort on controlling other people's experience. So I just wanted to get a little bit deeper into that today and offer some of that advice that I have found very peaceful for me. So sometimes taking a social media break helps deepen that work. That can really give us the distance we need to come back to it with some purity of heart and some detachment from the outcomes. And sometimes just meditating more on outcomes if we feel very passionate about something, and less on aggressively pushing things into other people's experience. Really, really deeply contemplate the place from which you're sharing and creating within the realm of disclosure, within this community. Really watch very closely what state you're in and whether you have certain attachments so that you can shift that. And in this way, the same action becomes completely different. So sharing a certain article while you're feeling a bit frenetic about getting it out there and getting people to wake up is very different than sharing the same article from a place of peace and detachment. So just something to, I know I repeated some of this a lot, but I really wanted to land. Let some of that tumble around in your brains and hearts so that we can keep doing this beautiful work and use full disclosure as an amazing opportunity for service to other selves. Hello again. So, I wanted to offer some words on belief. This is a really interesting topic when we come into the work of disclosure, of experiencing disclosure, of advocating for disclosure, of being activists. So, belief is very tricky. We want to drop belief in terms of things that we have not experienced ourselves. This initially may seem kind of strange, but follow me here. So, we don't need belief, and we don't need to create belief in others. Everything that's arriving into your experience is what you need. So we get what we need, not what we want. So if certain information is arriving in your life about ETs, things like that, high technology, secrets, conspiracies, then that was somehow what you needed in your process of awakening. And someone else may not get that because it's not what they need. So the tricky thing comes into moving through material in which things are being suggested that are beyond our realm of experience. Right? So let's say you're reading about a contactee who has had a great deal of experience with non-terrestrials. Well, you don't need to believe in someone else's story, but you can notice how it's uplifting you in your process, and you can hold it lightly in terms of it creating a roadmap for the experiences that are going to come your way in the future. So we get what we need, especially in terms of concepts and ideas and expanded notions, so that we can be more open to receiving future experiences. So when you encounter information that is beyond the realm of your experience, and yet it feels uplifting, that's not necessarily a calling to believe that information as truth, but rather for it to be held lightly within you as a tool to walk through what is coming in your future days with more awareness, with more care, with more consciousness. So we need to understand that when information arrives in someone's space, that's an intervention of spirit. We don't want to get lost in the notion that we're actually in control of that. When you think of something like synchronicity operating, right? When we have certain numbers popping up, or when we've been thinking of something specific and then suddenly an article on that exact thing comes into our life. Any form of synchronicity like that, that's a very clear example of spirit intervening on your behalf, offering something that you need, not want, need, for your evolution. So, if that's happening for you, and there's moments in which you become aware of its process, when you become aware of synchronicity as an example of spirit intervening, understand that it's also occurring when you're not aware of it. Spirit's intervention does not need to be part of your conscious awareness for it to be a factual happening. So, if that's the case, then that's the way it's operating for everyone all the time. Which means we're not in control of other people's receptivity. We're not in control of what's waking other people up. Right? We're not in control of any of that. It's always synchronicity and spirit intervening. We can become the medium through which something arrives, but we're not in control of that. So when we get into belief, whether it's our belief or someone else's belief, there's a certain amount of letting go that can soften our work and make it calmer for us in a lot of ways. You can think too that like the hardcore materialist approach is to believe that we're in full control, right? That we're manipulating this reality. And it turns out that's not so much the case, that there's an underlying involvement of spirit in this journey. So when you see something like Facebook curating content, right? Curating your newsfeed, well, you can understand that spirit is actually really curating. Spirit is curating the content that arrives in your life, both through, the content of social media, but also the content of your experiences. So when you step back and let this be the case, and let it be the case that you don't need belief, right? Believe your own experiences, certainly, but belief in anything beyond your own experience is not necessary. What's arriving, if it's outside of your experience, is support for experiences to come. And it's not a request that you believe or disbelieve. Right? Disbelief is actually a form of belief because it's just belief in the negative version of something. You don't need either one. Right? Hold information lightly, very lightly, and it will free you. And offer information very lightly, right? So that you're not trying to create disbelief or belief in anyone else. Trust that they will get what they need, and it's not up to you. Right? Offer yourself as a medium for something to arrive, but very lightly, with no attachment to how they may receive that. So I felt that might be helpful as we move through the process of consuming and creating disclosure-based content. And I have personally found this practice very helpful. And I certainly don't nail it all the time. I catch myself in beliefs and attachments to outcomes. But give it a try. I think that's it for today. Thanks. Bye.